Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is AJ from the Paladin Journal, and welcome back to another book review. And today we are going to talk about Descent of Angels by Mitchel Scanlon. This is book number 6 in the Horus Heresy series, and it has also long been one of my least favorite books. And I'm going to get into a lot of the reasons why that is so. But suffice to say that if I wanted to, do a bit of a high level brief review, then it would be that most of the story has nothing to do with the Lion, with Luther, or what the Dark Angels are like, or much of anything of substance about the chapter, really. It is too focused on the human elements or the pre-Astartes elements of the Dark Angels, and it is much too focused on Caliban, the homeworld of the Dark Angels itself, as a character, and I think that takes away way too much from what the intention of the series was meant to be at this point in time. Because, like I said, this is book 6. We are just coming off a bunch of books that are dealing with Horus's main rebellion and the destruction at Esteban 3 and Esteban 5 and all of that. And then this book, just like, it puts the brakes on the whole thing, and then that's it. Boom. We're just going to go back in time, do sort of like a prequel story to everything, and ultimately it's not going to give you any answers. So anyways, that's the high level brief of the book. But if you go into some more details about it, the book is focused on the perspective of the aspirant Zahariel. He's a teenager, and he is trying to become a member of the Order, which is the main knightly formation that defends Caliban against the threat of the Great Beasts. Now, these Great Beasts are, huge, mutated, chaos mutated, actually, natural beasts that have evolved into different shapes and forms and whatnot, and they terrorize the entire planet. And the night formations of Caliban have emerged over the last 1,000 years to combat this menace. And now, with the Lion and Luther leading the charge, there's a crusade going on to end the threat of these great beasts in its entirety. Now, along with Zahariel, one of the other main characters is Nemiel, who is his cousin, and they both join the Order, and eventually they're both going to become members of the Legion itself. But what my expectations were for this book and what we got, there is a disconnect, because I was expecting something different. Because, when I got to this book, I just ordered it off Amazon, just straight up after reading the previous books. And, I had no preconceptions really, except it was a Dark Angels book. I have been a big fan of Angels of Darkness by Gav Thorpe previously, and that colored my perceptions of what this book might be about. And, the reality, as I say, was quite different. And like I said in my high level brief, I didn't like that we focused so much on Zahariel and Nemiel and the rest of the Order, how they function with the crusade against the great beasts. And, it's like almost 80% of the book is just about all of that. How they go from being aspirants to becoming knights, rising through the ranks of the Order, and they barely have any interactions with Lion and Luther. And much of it seems, I'm not going to say contrived, but, there's like, oh yeah, we need to connect them to the Lion and Luther, so let's have these two characters, drop in like every few chapters or something, and, we just go from there. What I wanted out of this book was the same thing that I actually ended up getting from the previous books, which was insight into the psyche of the Legion, insight into the psyche of the Primarch, seeing how the different personalities play off each other, and, the internal conflicts. Instead, we get almost none of that. And, the book spends so much time just building up, building up, building up. And then we get to the conclusion where, or not the conclusion, we get to the climax of the entire story that's been building up. And it's like, oh, it's all done in like 3 chapters, maybe 4 chapters, and then that's it. There's this big battle, against these really inconsequential deviant human culture, and that's pretty much all that it is about. And I felt very disappointed with that. Now, this is like my second reread over the last like 17 years or so. And I have to say that I hate to say this, but this book has been a new low for me because it took me almost 2.5 months to read the book. Granted, most of the time I really didn't feel like it, and I was busy with other things, so just reading this book just didn't feel like a priority at all. And it was like, I felt bad about that, and also because obviously there's been a lot of work that has gone into this book, but I felt that this was very much the wrong point in the main narrative of the heresy to put this book. If this book had come out after like you know say around book 15 or 16, which is when we started to get a lot more prequel stories with the anthologies and some of the short stories and even some of the audio dramas that we started to get around this time. I think that would have been a better point for this story, but as book 6, this just doesn't work. And it seems to be a very incomplete tale, which I guess is kind of on point where a Dark Angel story is concerned. But overall, I think that the narrative choices made with this book, they just didn't work. At least for me. I'm sure there's many people out there for whom it may have worked, but for me it didn't. And I also had trouble connecting with Zahariel because the book is way too introspective, and it carries on for so long with his story as an aspirant and a knight of the order that I just couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into the character, I couldn't get into the story, and like I said before, we see so little of the Lion and Luther, and it just doesn't work as a Dark Angel story in the Heresy. Also, there are references to how the enmity between the Lion and the Luther is gonna shape up to be in the future that we know of from past stories, past modern 40k stories, such as Angels of Darkness, and so the other books that Gav Thorpe has written, that some of the other writers have done, and the codices that came up in 40k up to the point of the printing of this novel, and even beyond. All that lore that we already know, almost none of that is reflected here. Now, as a prequel book, I did expect that as the story moved on towards its climax, that we would start to see something, but it was more like switches being flipped. It's like, okay, we're going to tell this story with this character who's really not connected to the Lion and Luther, because Zahariel and Nemiel, while they are the main characters of the book, they don't really get to connect with either of those characters. Zahariel does have a bit of a connection to the Lion, but that's more in terms of his deeds that kind of mirror what the Lion has done before, rather than anything else. They're not senior advisors or anything. They're just common battle brothers. Even when they become a member, when they become members of the Dark Angels Legion, and they're assigned to one of the chapters, which itself is it's a bit on the sidelines even, and none of that really made sense to me. And also there was the choice made towards the end of the story where it's like, okay, we need to have the Lion and Luther and Zahariel and Nemiel and some of these other characters. We need them all to be in one place for this story to conclude. But the connective tissue, it just didn't feel effective to me. And I feel that there could have been more done because, the story at that point kind of jumps around with Zahariel's narration and with the third person narration in the book itself, where it's like Sarosh, the planet and the system that they go to for the final conflict. It's like it's one of the very first engagements that the Legion is going to be fighting in, but also Zahariel and Nemean have already been battle brothers for like a decade, maybe more, and that just confused the whole timeline for me because I was like, are they veterans? Are they just regular battle brothers? Or what's going on? Why are they getting the honor of escorting the Lion and Luther to a very non-important post? And you know, as I said, with the conclusion, with the final villains itself, they just come out of nowhere. There's absolutely no build up at all to any of it, and it's just like, yeah, so we just we need this to happen, and we're just gonna go straight through. We're just gonna barrel through it, and we're just gonna tell the story rather than taking the time to let the story ferment and develop. Give the characters more reasons to feel the way that they do instead of just keep harping back on the same kind of thing. And I felt that Zahariel was a very bland character in the end, as was Nemiel. And then to carry forward with all of that, I thought that there was this one bit where the imperialization of Caliban is about to happen. The planet has been discovered. The Legion is on its way. It has already arrived. The advanced parties have already arrived. The Mechanicum is already doing its work on the planet, and now we're just waiting for the Emperor himself to arrive because he sent the message that he wants to meet his son, the Lion, and there's a conspiracy happening on Caliban at that time that is against the Imperial forces because these people they're afraid of how the lives are going to change, and part of that entire conspiracy thing that's happening at the moment is because, first of all the different knight orders of Caliban are being brought together under the umbrella of the order, the one that's led by the Lion and by Luther. And not all of them agree, and they're malcontents in every single strata of the leadership. And what I really felt was a disservice, not just to the story itself, but to the characters and to the identity of the Dark Angels as a legion and as a chapter post the heresy, was that none of it felt real, none of it felt impactful, because no major character is involved in that conspiracy that we know of, and it's never really addressed again anyway. So it's like, well, what was the point of it all of that? And those are the kind of things that they take away from the story, they pull you out, and they make it harder to connect to all these characters. It makes it harder to connect to the story itself. Because there was no personality to it, there was no direct connection to any of it, and it's just like, okay, yeah, so Zahariel is involved on the sidelines. Okay, so what? And there's I really struggle to have some coherent thoughts about this because I just feel that it was a really wild story, and there was too much freedom given to delving into these characters rather than trying to build out a tapestry of characters and story that can work in the larger frame, because this book, it feels utterly disconnected to anything that's happening in the rest of the heresy. And this goes back to my earlier point. All the previous 5 books, they connect. The first 4 books, they're pretty much a direct story from Horus becoming War Master, and then over the months, and to a point of like a year, maybe a year and a half after he's already been the War Master, to the Dropside Massacre, and to Garrow going to Terra to warn the Emperor and the rest of the Imperium that Horus has turned, and all of it all works together. Fulgrim is set across that entire spectrum, that entire timeline of those events from the first 4 books, and all of it is like, okay, so what was the point of putting this story at this place in the narrative? And there's so many issues with it, with the pacing, with the characters, even with the world building, because Caliban is just like, oh, it's a forest world, basically, or a jungle world, and there's these knights that remind you of, the medieval era, and there's all this talk about honor and whatnot, and there's also some kind of like social stratification, and we never really delve into any of it. It's just like it's all just salad dressing rather than being the actual salad itself, so to speak. Because I'm sure there's so many more things that could have been done to flesh out the narrative and the characters, but it seems that not enough care was given to the story and the characters. So this is what we get. And I have to say, at the risk of repetition, this book was a new low for me in all of my Black Library reading, because of the books that at least I finished, this is definitely the one that I would rate the lowest. And I say that as someone who's been a fan for more than 22 years now, and who's read a lot of different stuff, whether from like the late 90s and early 2000s to even any of the modern stuff, whether it's 40k, AOS, fantasy, whatever, the horror stuff, and I believe the crime stuff, or sorry, the horror stuff and the young adult stuff is still something that I have to delve into. But yeah, so coming to the end of it, uh, it feels like a book you can skip, pretty much. I have not read the next book that is connected to this one, which I believe is called Fallen Angels, but I have listened to the audiobook of the third one, I think. But again, that's like, more than 12, 13 years ago. And I barely remember any of it other than, it's just more of Zahariel and him feeling bad for himself and exploring the darkness of Caliban and whatnot. And again, none of it really connects. So, anyways, an easily skippable book. It really doesn't tell you much about anything, whether it's the heresy itself or it's about the lion and the Luther and how their friendship turns into an enmity spanning 10,000 years, and any of that stuff. It has almost no relevance to any of the previous lore about Dark Angels, other than okay, Caliban, Lion, Luther, heresy about to start, and so on and so forth. That's really it. So, unfortunately, not a good book in my opinion, and like I said, easily skippable. So, it is what it is. Hope you have had a better experience. If not, just let me know. If you have had a better experience, I'm open to suggestion on how my view could be changed. Although it's my third read through of the book, and it took me almost 2.5 months to get to it, to get to the end, and I really had to force myself. So that's what that is. So anyways, guys, so thanks for sticking around for the review. Just be sure to check out my socials and drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. See you next time for another book review, which is going to be coming tomorrow. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.